Hi, welcome to the Ian Khan Show. This is an Aftershock special episode. And my guest today is David Guston. He's the foundation professor and founding director of the School of Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. David is a multi-award winning author, a professor, and a leading thinker in the world. He is widely published and cited in research. David is someone you want to know and you want to learn about his perspective about the future. Here we are, David Guston. David, welcome to the Ian Khan Show. This podcast is about the future. This is about having a conversation after you contributed to Aftershock, and thank you for being part of this amazing work that I've been fortunate enough to be part of as well. But your insights in the book are amazing. And today I want to ask you about your thoughts, your ideas that literally shape the future. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Ian. Thanks so much. It's great to be here, and I had a lot of fun working with John Schroeder and working on the book. So I am a political scientist by training, but the focus of my work over the long part of my career has been around the interaction between science, technology, and innovation and democratic politics. And as my career has progressed, I've been more interested in the ways that people have thought about the future, or better, futures, because there isn't one future yet. And in my most recent activities here at Arizona State University 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to be the founding director of a school for the future of innovation in society. And so among the things that we do here at my school is think about, train students in, do research in a variety of ways of thematizing future thinking and making it sort of more tractable for folks who do it natively anyway.
Yeah, and I don't believe that exists in many different places. It's not a very popular thing. So the fact that you have that going is, I believe, in my opinion, very forward-looking, and I think it's the right direction to go in. We undoubtedly live in a society and a culture that is full of hype, and I do not like hype. I don't like overblown things, because it takes us away from reality. It takes us away from doing real work. And you know, when you open the newspaper, if you actually open the newspaper and read it, I don't. You see so much hype around artificial intelligence, about space travel, about commercialization of intergalactic travel, a bunch of different things. I want to start asking you about Toffler, first of all, because your views on Toffler are incredible. I really like them. And in Aftershock, the book, and it's available on Amazon, I believe, as well now,
yes,
you've written about three different things, or three different ways, or three different categories or points in which Toffler was not right. He missed it. Tell us about those, because it's not all about the great things. It's about, hey, what's been going on?
Right. So, basically, to go back for your listeners, the fundamental argument for Toffler is that future shock is a sort of social malady. It's an analogy at the societal level to an individual illness, but that individuals suffer from this as well, and that basically technical change is happening too quickly for people to adjust happily to it, and so they experience all sorts of problems. And one of the things that Toffler, I think, really misses, and perhaps this is the most fundamental issue, is that Toffler seems to be describing a vision of technological change or technological progress that is, in some sense, more deterministic than otherwise, that it is separate from society. It is something that goes on its own accord, like a steam locomotive on a railroad track without an engineer. It just keeps on going. And what's wrong with that is that we, as human beings, individuals, collectives, governments, communities, that we actually have a lot of opportunity to choose, to make choices about what technologies go forward and what technologies do not, what science gets done that underpins those technologies and what science does not get done. And what things that we as consumers choose to interact with and choose to purchase and what things we don't. And that Toffler sort of misses both that formative aspect and the other ways in which society molds, shapes, crafts technologies such that they are not out there simply impacting on us, that we are impacting them as well. And so what I and other folks in the academy like me, we like to talk in a register of the socio-technical rather than just the technical. And that gives us an opportunity to think, on the one hand, about social organizations as technologies, but also as technologies and their deep interplay with what it is that we do as social beings. And that gives you a much more, I think, nuanced, much more flexible approach toward understanding how to cope with the challenge of technological change.
Yeah. And that, I think, dealing with change and adapting to change are just two fundamental skills that we need to be able to learn right now in order to have a successful outcome in whatever we choose to do as a profession, as people, as society, as culture.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you about anticipatory governance. You've talked about this in your book. Tell us about what is this new model of governance where you want things to be more democratic, engagement to be democratic. What is this? This is a big idea.
Yeah. So to link it back to Toffler again, he uses the phrase anticipatory democracy. But in his view, writing at the very beginning of the 1970s, what anticipatory meant to him was linking up with the new computer-based models of budgeting and demographics and so on. And whereas that has played a critical role in the way that government has functioned since that time, the sense of anticipation that I'm after is not one that is hardwired to forecasting a future state the way that a demographic projection or an economic projection might be, but one that is more about looking to the variety of futures that are open and building a capacity in the present to deal with that breadth of uncertainty and to help choose which kinds of futures we might want to live in and to direct our efforts towards there. So if you look, I often describe this etymologically. If you look at the word anticipation, that, that ante part is not like pro or for as in foresight. You're not sensing something that where a future that is going to occur. The ante stuff is logically prior, as well as, in addition to being temporally prior. And the Kippere part is about a capacity. It's not a sensation. It's not a vision. It's about building up something in a prior fashion. And so that's the sense that I really want to get at in this anticipatory governance, that our job is not to say what the future is going to be like and then set our train track toward that future. It's to understand the panoply of things that might unfold and to begin to build the capacities that are appropriate for both that diversity, but for the things that we normatively favor. The governance part recognizes that, yes, I want democratic governance, but the governance part recognizes the multi-centered nature of technological choice. Okay, that if you take the perspective that I was describing a little bit earlier about this socio-technical business, that because change is socio-technical, people and organizations in all sorts of different places get to make decisions that are authoritative for them, authoritative for their communities, authoritative for their policies, authoritative for their corporations, and so on. So governance is a way of describing that multi-centered aspect of technological or socio-technological choice. And I don't think that either of those things were really well grounded in Toffler. These are things that have become, I think, more in conversation since he sort of plowed the way.
Yeah, and talking about governance and how do we anticipate what is to come and start formulating a way to structure that right now, I think by far is missing. There's no governance on technology, on emerging technologies, or AI as an example, because it's out there right now. There's no rules to who can do what. And I think that's a big gray area where you can anybody can abuse the system if they want to, but then they can do anything they want. Like, it's also a danger to society to have that area without governance. Are you seeing any work on this internationally? Like, internationally, what's happening across the world?
Yeah, so globally, there are a set of different kinds of frameworks to begin to have these conversations. So many of my colleagues in Northern and Western Europe use a register of responsible innovation or responsible research and innovation to begin to have these discussions. And there are funding agencies in the United Kingdom, in the Netherlands, and elsewhere that try to provide frameworks for responsible innovation for the scientists and engineers that they are funding. Particularly in things like synthetic biology, geoengineering, sometimes in AI and robotics. That's a language or a construct that I've helped develop over a long period of time and is tightly related to this idea of anticipatory governance because it requires some kinds of capacities for doing this anticipatory activity, this foresight activity. These languages have also developed on their own in the private sector. And so right now, my colleagues and I are working with a project with the Mitsubishi Chemical Holdings Corporation, a very large Japanese-based multinational, not Mitsubishi Electronics, not Mitsubishi Automotive, but Mitsubishi Chemical. And they have a natively derived concept that they call kaiteki. And kaiteki literally denotes in Japanese comfort, but they have developed a framework around it where it connotes health, well-being, and sustainability across generations. And it's very similar to responsible innovation. It's very similar in what it demands from anticipatory governance. And it's about the idea that private firms that are engaged in innovation, they believe are not going to thrive in the future without the ability to demonstrate that they're contributing to public or social value in addition to creating private value. And so they need, as a firm, based on their understanding of kaiteki, to be able to think more systematically about what the public value of innovation looks like. Another concept that's being developed right now in the States is a concept of public interest technology. And this is mostly focused in the digital realm right now, but a lot of us are working to expand it. 2 generations ago, the Ford Foundation helped create the field of public interest law. So before the late 1960s, early 1970s, lawyers did not have a good sense of career paths other than private practice or in-house corporate counsel. And Ford said, hey, wait a minute, the law is an instrument of the distribution of justice and the distribution of equity in this country, and more people should have access to legal expertise. And so they helped create this field of public interest law to create curricular programs, to create internships for lawyers, to create educational pathways and clinics and law schools and so on, to allow lawyers to have public interest careers. Ford Foundation is now partnered with New America, with Mozilla, and Hewlett and others to try to do this for the field of technology. Now, we can talk about differences between technology and law as fields, certainly, but I think it's quite apparent that this kind of effort is necessary because too often the idea of innovation, the pathways for training people in technologies is straight to the private sector, and that the public sector is left behind, and that the public interest is left behind because of that.
Incredible. I want to ask you about Asia and the developments that are, as an example, taking place in, say, China, without pointing literally a finger. But China is doing a lot of work, investing a lot. They've got a lot of manpower, so they're doing incredible work, I'm sure. There's also this idea of the countries becoming surveillance states as technology emerges and they're doing different things. How do we deal with this? And it's a question of governance, as you said, responsible innovation. How do you control this or put a tab on it when governments are able to spend an unlimited amount of money or funding, and then you have no choice as a citizen but to deal with it?
there are some real complexities here that are very frustrating to deal with. So thinking about China for the moment as a really interesting example, until the CRISPR babies, the whole dialogue had been, well, if we don't do it here, they'll do it in China.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out that an international framework of let's try not to use this new technology of really fancy, really easy gene editing on human beings, that was articulated by a set of global institutions, none of whom have real authority over scientific behavior, but have some prestige. And then again, somebody in China went ahead and did this, but what did the Chinese do? This guy has now been tried, found guilty, and is being punished. Okay? So it's, it's complex. It's not just that these other countries will do things that are ethically suspect that we would never do.
Yeah.
Nor is it just that we will set the ethical example, but that we have to think about building robust frameworks of understanding, of norms, of control that, in my view, an analogy to doing these things are things like the frameworks that we've built around the global control of some weapons and some instruments of war. Okay, so where we have really important contributions by global entities and by nation states in the control of technologies, most of them are around technologies of destruction, whether it's nuclear weapons or landmines or child soldiers. We actually have fairly robust regimes in talking about this. Yes, they have their failures, but they're pretty darn good because in part everybody can see how their self-interest is played out in the collective restrictions.
Yeah, one of the things I can think of, I had CRISPR written down here, is weaponized drones, and that's an area that's coming up. There's a little bit of a movement opposing that, weaponized drones, and there's tons of videos out there that show what is possible and what is not. And for those of the viewers who have seen the Black Mirror or one of these sci-fi shows, I really love them because they actually can help understand what's happening or what could potentially happen. What are your insights on some of those things, which is like weaponizing technology to an extent that it's anybody could just spin off maybe something from their cell phone tomorrow?
Well, that's one of the interesting things about those control regimes that I suggested and some things like weaponized drones is that it allows, that I think there's some hope for that in the sense that, weaponized drones create a new dimension to asymmetric warfare.
Yeah.
And that new dimension puts the larger countries, the more established militaries, the ones that make larger investments in bigger, bulkier, more static things, more vulnerable. So that gives them incentives to help control that kind of technology. That control will never be perfect, but it gives incentives for the large entities to think about creating a regime of control where even they would be bound by that. I think that would probably end up being a good thing. I would, I would prefer if killing is going to be done to have humans in the loop, by and large, rather than not. Your point about seeing these things through the lens of contemporary science fiction, speculative fiction, and so on, I think that is a great opportunity to seed these kinds of discussions among a broad group of the public. For my taste, Dark Mirror is really interesting and provocative. It perhaps is a little too provocative for popular consumption in the kind of way that I'm thinking about, that it is dark, it is intended to be dark, and I think it might be helpful to explore some other ways of thinking about these alternative futures. One of my favorite things that happened in a very popular mode over the past couple of years was not looking forward but looking backward. There was a network television show called Timeless, which had a time travel theme, but it looked back in time rather than forward in time, and it reminded us of this sort of interesting socio-technical nature of change, particularly around its characters, including a woman, including an African American, who found these various things in the past not particularly to their liking, and so it yoked the idea of social progress and technological progress in a very interesting way. And I think we have to think about that moving forward. What is this connection between social progress and technological progress? Again, the socio-technical that we're bringing forward.
Yeah, we're running out of time, and thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your insights. In the next few minutes, I just wanted to ask you very briefly about what you've written in the book as well, is about this idea and this notion where technology is evolving. You've got Moore's law, you've got singularity. It's a very linear model, if that's the right way to say it.
Yes.
What is that all about? Like, should we start thinking in that direction, or break it down and kind of not think in that direction? I want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So my thought is that those linear extrapolations are important, necessary, but I think some of them, at least I think, contribute to the hype that you opened the broadcast with, in the sense that the linear extrapolation is based on the idea of all things being equal. And sometimes all things are equal going forward, and sometimes they're not. And what the linear extrapolation will do for you is prepare you for a certain set of kinds of outcomes, but blind you to a whole host of other kinds of outcomes. So Moore's law prepares us for incredibly powerful machines. It doesn't prepare us for the consequences of those incredibly powerful machines. And so if you look at the AI community, and actually one of my doctoral students just finished a dissertation that was in part grounded on this, if you look at the AI community, everybody knows Moore's law, but there's great disagreement about what the consequence of Moore's law is for the capacities of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so the AI community is at odds in trying to, for themselves, prognosticate when certain achievements will be made. Yeah. And given the sort of ineluctable nature of intelligence, many of them are even at odds over understanding the progress that has been made and putting an appropriate label.
There's no Moore's law for non-hardware things, correct? I mean, Moore's law is very a hardware, microprocessor, transistor capacity kind of a law. Yes.
Yeah, and the biologists have sort of tagged onto this with the cost of sequencing DNA that will then be followed by the cost of recompiling DNA and so on.
Correct. So with AI as an example, is there a way to directly correlate Moore's law with AI? I don't believe so. Right?
I don't have the expertise to say yes or no on that. But what I would say is, that the linear extrapolation, the Moore's law, doesn't give us the meaning of that. That the next step, and yes, people who have talked about the singularity have tried to give some meaning to that, but they've done it through an individual visionary perspective rather than, say, one that is embracing of a wide part of society and their interests and aspirations for what incredibly powerful AI might be. Okay, and so the folks who talk about singularities are, in that sense, promoting a values-based vision that is grounded on this linear projection, and we have all sorts of different conversations around a values-based vision that came from many more places in society.
Right. Thank you. That's profound. I really like that because we wanted to find out the answer to that. I know we're almost out of time. Tell me a little bit about the Oxford Futures Forum.
So it's not something that I've been directly involved with. One of my colleagues here at ASU, Cynthia Celine, teaches in the Oxford Futures Forum, and it's a way of harnessing a scenario development methodology to both for training and for forecasting purposes. But their grounding in scenario development as a methodology is something that, that is a mechanism for getting beyond that sort of singularity vision of bringing multiple voices together around some understanding of what pathways could be to allow a multi-voiced, multifaceted vision of futures.
I got it. Where can we find more information and our viewers find more information on the School for the Futures of Innovation in Society?
So the school is at sfis.asu.edu. I'm happy. I'm the director of that school. In the right-hand part of that menu, there's a director's welcome. I'm david.guston at asu.edu. I'm happy to receive inquiries about the school. We have graduate programs, undergraduate programs, and a whole lot of research capacity that we do around these areas, including emerging technologies, energy transitions, futures, stuff like that.
That's incredible. I'll make sure that we put that in the description of the video as well so that people can reach you. But David, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I really appreciate the time you've spent speaking to us and our audiences. Again, Aftershock is available, I believe, on Amazon or in many different other places, but it's an incredible read. Lots of different insights, perspectives shared by experts like David and other folks around the world. David, thank you so much. Have a super stellar day and looking forward to chatting with you again.
Thanks so much, Ian. Take care.
Okay. Hey friend, this is Ian Khan. If you liked what you saw on my video, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and be inspired every single day with innovative content that keeps you fresh, updated, and ready for the future. For more information, also visit my website at iankhan.com.